Hello, folks. Welcome to Rational Science. I'm going to tell you a little bit of what happened the other day. I was sick. Suddenly, I had a bad feeling in my chest. I thought I had some heart problem. And this is like the third time that I get this in 2 years, several months apart. And so I don't think it's related to COVID or anything like that. A little later, I felt a little better, but 2 hours after that, I got it again, went to sleep, woke up in the morning. I felt okay when I woke up, but a little later, I had the same problem. So I decided to see the doctor. Went to see the doctor, they took my pressure, checked my heart. Pressure was a little high, and so they said, well, just in case, I'm going to send you to the hospital. So I went to the hospital and they had me under observation for about 5 hours and checking my heart, my pressure, the blood, that sort of thing. Served for my yearly checkup while I was there. And yeah, I had a little bit of higher pressure. I don't know why. I usually have normal pressure. And my blood came out with higher glucose, which means my one of my brothers died this year. He died of diabetes, and I'm a little worried about that. So I probably have to change my diet a little bit and do a little more exercise. So maybe that's what it's about. But I think it was a muscle spasm that was maybe pressing my lungs, and maybe that's why it was affecting my breathing. Anyways, what you learn after being 5 hours in a bed at the hospital is that all you need, the only prerequisite to die is to be alive. It's a black or white issue. Okay, so either you're alive or you're dead, black or white, no in between. Some people believe that there's this no man's land. You're not neither in heaven or in hell. I don't think so. You're either dead or you're alive. Some people even believe you come back from the dead. The spirit comes back. Yeah, we have all these theories out there. Anyways, I had the other day asked the question, a couple of questions. Okay, will man live another 1,000 years? Will we live the next 100 years in either a service economy or in a leisure unemployment economy of some kind? And the third one, will we ever have a world government? Well, only one person apparently answered the questions. He said, no, yes, yes, no. In other words, will man live another 1,000 years? No. And will we ever have a world government? No. But he believes, probably a young fellow, that we will live another 100 years, and it's going to be one of those two: service economy and or right leisure unemployment economy. And yeah, I have a difference of opinion with him. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think one of the reasons a lot of these people today believe that there's going to be still more time ahead of us, 100 years, is they say, well, I want to live my life. I want to get my Social Security. I want to retire. And then when I die, I don't care what happens. That's the notion they have in the back of their minds. And all I want to do is clarify for you that, we would all love to live forever, maybe. But there's a problem. There's a problem, and the problem is that when extinction comes around, okay, whenever it comes around, it doesn't matter, if this is the last generation or not, but whenever it comes around, in the last generation, you'll find people who are old and people who are young. You'll find toddlers dying together with grandfathers, And so, this notion that, uh, you know, you're going to live your life and then it's going to happen after you leave and you don't care, it'd be nice. But maybe you're one of those 20 or 30 or 40 years old who's going to die together with the 80 years old and with the 2 year old toddlers. Okay, so this is what I think is going to happen. All I can give you is my opinion on that. As far as extinction is concerned, I'm looking at one thing and one thing only, and that's the mechanism. Okay, that's what concerns science, not the date when it's going to happen. Okay, so we all have different opinions on the date. Okay, and I don't venture dates. I do venture dates, but I take that with a grain of salt, and I ask you to do that as well. The important thing is the mechanism. What is going to cause the extinction of man? Because that relates to science. Why? Because we're trying to explain how extinctions happened in the past. How did the dinosaurs die? How did the Triassic archosaurs die? That's what we want to understand. Okay, we want to understand the mechanism. Okay, last time I mentioned about Argentina. I was there a little while ago, and there was another article saying essentially that everybody's essentially going to follow Argentina, and that the economy there is a shambles, by the way, great inflation, which is happening elsewhere as well. In fact, it's happening in the United States, it's happening here in Germany, okay? And it says, an analyst at currency broker Oanda said a new deal would likely involve Latin America's third largest economy having to take some tough medicine. What's the medicine? Well, at the bottom you see it there. It says, will require major cuts with public spending. And, people over there have gotten used to public spending. Money comes in easy from the government, and people kind of like that, or they gotten used to it. And I'm not sure any politician in Argentina will be able to go in there and suddenly say, well, we're going to have to reduce your income. Here we have inflation on the one hand, people can't even make it to the end of the month. And on top of that, the government is going to somehow cut that in order to pay the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank or whoever. I don't think so. I think they're going to, in the end, decide to screw the people. They're going to do the best they can, try to walk a fine line between the IMF and the populace. I think a lot of economies in the world will be following the course that Argentina has been following lately, which is, they're going to default on their debt. They can't pay. They don't have enough money. And, if they do pay it, then they have to squeeze the people and they won't get voted into office. So there's this whole runaround. One thing leads to another. I don't think there's a solution. I think it's part of the process of the extinction of man, the global economy collapsing, and no one being able to do anything about it. Okay, so yeah, all this stuff about that the rich and powerful. Well, in fact, I'll be talking about that next. So here it is. A little while. Fellow says you should read an interesting article. Sends me to this article talking about Klaus Schwab. We talked a little bit about him lately. School for COVID Dictators. Plan for Great Reset. He talks about the Great Reset, talks about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the singularity, all that nonsense, right? And says their economist, Ernst Wolf, believes that a hidden alliance of political and corporate leaders is exploiting the pandemic with the aim of crashing national economies and introducing a global digital currency. Okay, so we have these conspiracy theories about the rich and powerful, the filthy rich and wealthy, I guess, that are taking over the world and they're deciding what to do, But, the first thing you should come to grips with is that this has happened always. There's always been rich people in every single age. Was there a conspiracy? Well, you can call it a conspiracy in the sense that, there's always been rich people who took decisions for the majority of the population. I talked about that the other day. The philosopher kings, they rule. and they have the money to rule. So do you have any money to rule? If you don't, well, then you got a problem, right? So these people ruled with power, and the power comes from the money that they own, the assets, etc. And they all get together and they all more or less take decisions for the rest of humanity. So that's normal. Now, are they taking advantage of this COVID? Yeah, and there is a little bit of problem there because I believe there is a bug out there, first of all, okay? I think there is. I'm not sure about it, but if I had to weigh it, I'd say 60, 70% chance that there is a bug out there, okay? Should we stop the global economy because of that? Should we take all these draconian measures and kill the tourist industry, prevent people from traveling, prevent people from going to the hotels and restaurants, etc.? I don't know. I think it's probably overkill. But on the other hand, if you don't do that, well, maybe you're going to fill the hospitals and the morgues, and there's not enough personnel to take care of all this population that suddenly gets sick. So what do? You're caught like between the sword and the wall. So I don't know what the solution is. All I'm saying is there probably is a bug out there, and some people are taking advantage of that, no doubt about that. And the question is, can we do anything about it? And should we do anything about it? Or should we assuming there's a bug, right? Should we let people die? Just, whoever gets it and dies, well, you die. Whoever gets sick and recovers, fine, you recovered. Whoever wants to get the shot gets the shot. Whoever doesn't, doesn't. But to put all these draconian measures, I don't know. I don't know if that's the way to treat this, because you may be killing more people by killing the economy or doing it faster for the world. Okay? In other words, you may be inducing the extinction of man sooner. Okay? And so the question is, do we want to live longer and let whoever dies die? Or should we save everybody we can and kill the economy and just bring about the extinction of man sooner? I think that's the choice here. Okay, so the article said there, the main goal of the WEF activities is to facilitate further high-level cooperation between big business and national governments, to destroy the businesses of small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, so that multinational corporations based in the United States and China can monopolize business everywhere. Okay, it's like this guy discovered for the first time in his life that the rich govern the world. No, that's always happened again. The ultimate conclusion is that democracy as we know it has been silently canceled. I agree with what the other fellow said the other day that I mentioned that there is no such thing as democracy, and there's never been democracy. It's always been the rule of the rich, the philosopher kings, or the philosopher rich. They rule the world. They have the money to rule the world. They have the power. That's it. And it's always been like that. So there's this democracy thing is something new to me. I never heard of it. What is that? An examination of how governance around the world works today shows that an elite of super wealthy and powerful individuals effectively control everything that goes on in politics. Yeah, you just found out about that? I mean, it's like, is this new to you? The best way to combat these designs is simply to educate people about what is happening, okay? Let's educate them. And for them to realize that the narratives of the super dangerous virus is a lie. Again, maybe that's an erroneous conclusion that it's a lie. Again, the only reason I think it's probably an erroneous conclusion is that I don't think that enemy countries would cooperate on that issue. I don't think Iran, Cuba would be in cahoots with the United States and say, oh, let's do the same thing to it. Let's tell the same lie, the same fib to our population. I don't think Cuba would have a reason for that, unless there is really a bug out there, first of all. Second, they're losing tourism, which is a big portion, has become a big portion of the Cuban economy. So for the Cuba to cooperate with the rich and powerful of the world, because there's a few rich and powerful people ruling Cuba, I don't think so. I think that I have to believe that there is a bug if it's so universal. Are people taking advantage of that? Absolutely, no doubt about that. And is there a conspiracy in the sense that they created the bug in advance to create a given situation? I have doubts on that one. It is possible that they have no solution to the global economy and that they could have done this to justify why they can't fix the global economy. That's one form of reasoning, one way you can reason this thing out. But again, I don't think enemy countries would cooperate and reach an agreement with these folks and say, let's all tell the same lie to our people. That I have problems with. Should we intervene? Do something about it? Well, again, maybe it's better to let people die. Whoever falls, falls. I'm sorry, even if it's someone in your family or you. But I think that's the way that should be handled because otherwise we're killing the economy, and that might be the remedy might be worse than the disease. Okay. Okay, fellows, just doubles up on that. I think Bill needs to look at the COVID is all about control aspect of a bit harder. Yeah, again, a lot of people think this is a conspiracy and they don't want to get the shots and they uh, don't like the fact that the government is forcing them to get the shots and saying, we're going to pass a law that says that if you work in such and such place, you need the vaccine. If you go to a restaurant, you need a vaccine. Here, they started implementing that anyone who gets on a public transportation now will have to carry either the little passport, the visa, the COVID visa. You need to show that that you've been vaccinated, or show that you had a PCR test that morning. Okay. Otherwise, I guess they fine you, they arrest you, they execute you. I don't know what they do. But yeah, they're penalizing anyone who doesn't get the shots. And again, the only reason I got the shot is I had to travel. And boy, even like that, it's a pain in the butt. But if you don't have the shots, my God, they're gonna make life so miserable for you. You'd be so sorry you didn't. Okay, you'd say, I'll take the shot any day after the pain they make you go through. Okay, fellow says all forms of big government, including communism, involve one group of people invoking their will on others. Absolutely, it's always been like that, never changed. Okay, a direct democracy and an informed electorate could prevent cronyism. Oh, I don't know about that. There's no such thing as a direct democracy, but that's what he suggests. He says small government minimizes this by only making the most essential services. Okay, for example, he says the essential, I mean necessary to prevent harm to others, and he says everyone needs food, drink, and shelter, right? But we can choose these services ourselves without potentially harming others. So there's no need for an authority to provide them for us. So, again, all these folks, these are the narco caps. The bottom line is they want government off their backs. They want this, you could call it a world government or the absence of a world government. Again, it's what Marx had in mind. They call themselves anarcho-capitalists, but they are anarcho-communists. They just don't know it. Okay, they haven't read Marx. Marx already predicted, that was his prediction. It didn't come true and it won't come true, but he predicted this is what he suggested. He says there's going to be a world government eventually, he said, and then government itself will cease to exist. There won't be any government. How he envisioned it in the 19th century, I have no idea, but these people are suggesting a way, and the way they plan to do it is this way. Here, this is the notion they have. I'll illustrate it. Okay, everybody at home, at their office, and they're going to vote with computers. Okay, so they're just going to go in there and say, well, we're not going to vote for people. We're not going to vote for politicians. What we're going to do is vote for specific issues. And I guess majority vote. In that sense, it's going to be a democracy that these people envision. I used to believe in a lot of this stuff myself. I'm guilty, right? Okay. But no longer. No way. I think, first of all, the extinction of man is going to occur much sooner then we ever get this world government, which I don't think today, even if given enough time, I don't think it would happen anyways. Okay, but extinction is going to beat any arrangement of that nature, and any arrangement that the what I call the narco caps, all these anarcho capitalists, their dream is it's just idealism. It's nothing more than that. It's never going to happen. There won't be a world government, and there won't be a non-government. In other words, everybody just voting from their homes and living with their computers and just walking around. Be great if it's an ideal world that exists in the land of the Klingons, perhaps, but not here on Earth. Never, never will happen. Okay, that's my 5 cents worth on that one. Okay, fellow says, biggest brains is always better given equal environment. You leave out environment. I talked about brain the other day, brain size and so on, whether the Orientals have a little bigger brains than the whites in the West, and which have bigger brains than the blacks, from Africa people, right? And I'm suggesting that brain size is not necessarily a sign of intelligence. That's the first issue. But this fellow says it's environment that influences brain size. All I can tell you is that could be the case historically, in other words, through evolution, that maybe in one side of the world the brains grew a little bigger because of some environmental issue. But today, I think that's over. We're not evolving that much today, I think. There could be some changes, minor changes, but the intelligence today has very little to do with brain size. That's my argument, okay? Now, if environment affects your food that you eat affects your brain in some way, well, for sure, if you drug yourself with heroin or cocaine, I'm sure that affects your brain. So once the effect goes away, do you recover your brains, or have you killed the cells in there? I don't know. I don't know enough about to have an opinion on that one. Okay, along the same lines, fellow says, the world's smartest man is a guy named Christopher Langman. Oh, okay, thank God. By smartest, I mean his IQ is like 200, okay? So he goes on and says a few things that this fellow came up with, some theories, and he says that this cognitive theoretic model of the universe, he can prove the existence of God, the soul, and an afterlife using mathematics. Now, isn't that intelligent? How smart can you get, And I don't know. Again, it tells you something. Does an IQ test tell you anything about intelligence? It's called an intelligence quotient test. Does it tell you anything about intelligence? And before you can answer the question, you absolutely need to define the word intelligence. Otherwise, we don't know what you're talking about, right? So I did define intelligence. I have it in my youstupidrelativist.com site. You can look it up over there because it's I've written about that. And the bottom line is the following: that in the intelligence quotients, these IQ tests, they test your memory. They don't test intelligence. Okay, and I'm sure a lot of these mathematicians, if the IQ test were about mathematics, they would beat a lot of humanity. If you just circumscribe it to mathematics, to equations, right? I think they would beat a lot of humanity. A lot of people out there don't even know how to add. And so you would say, okay, this guy has an IQ of 300 and this one only has one of 5, because he doesn't know how to add. Well, does that mean they're intelligent? In what way are they intelligent? Are we saying that they just memorize how to do equations and now they just fill in those equations with numbers and are able to do calculations? Is that a sign of intelligence? Or is it a sign of memory? Is memory intelligence? Okay. So, if you can recite the Bible or recite history, anything like that, are you intelligent? Maybe have a lot of RAM and very little CPU. Think about it. Does the IQ test tell you anything about intelligence? And again, you should have to define intelligence. The only thing I quickly will mention when I wrote about that is that everything, the cell, the first cell, which is the first living entity, already had intelligence. Life, in that sense, if it's compartmentalized, is already a distribution of, segments of system. It's a system of compartments. That's already intelligence. Every living entity has intelligence. Okay, but for that you need to define intelligence again. Okay, here's one thing I want to mention, and that's that you probably heard of Odysseus, and he was about 1,000 years BC. He went to the Trojan War, or so the Iliad tells us, right? And then Odysseus, he came back after 10 years. He came back to his town, his island of Ithaca. And along the way, he had all these adventures, and that's the second part of you have the Iliad, which is essentially the first part of Homer's book, and the second part is the, what is it, the, uh, the Odyssea, or whatever it's called. I can't remember now the name. But anyways, it's the trip of Odysseus back to his home. And he's got all these adventures, and one of those adventures is that he ends up in the land of the lotus eaters. It looks something like this, okay? And what happened was sailors, they got on shore and they started eating this lotus stuff. And think of that as maybe heroin or cocaine. They were all high on this stuff. And because of that, they didn't want to work and they didn't want to do anything. They just wanted to lay down and just eat the lotus flower or leaves or whatever. And so this is how they ended up. And so, Odysseus couldn't get them back on the ship. He just left them there and left. He went back home without them. And today we have a similar situation. We don't call it the land of the lotus eaters. We call them the land of leisure. Okay, that's where we're at today. We have all these people with their phones, and they live glued to their phones. You go on any public transportation or out on the streets, and what do you see? You see thousands of people with their phones, and they're just staring at it, reading it, typing on it. This is the land of the lotus eaters of our modern world. I call it the land of leisure. Why? Because most of the stuff that these people look at are entertainment. They write to people. A lot of people work with this as well. They have to communicate with their co-workers and so on. But what is it? It's a world in which we're just developing apps, applications. And they're selling this stuff, and people are including them in their little devices, and it's all to create commercials so that you buy more stuff, and it's just a cycle, a circular cycle. What they do is they just look, and it's like they're hypnotized, like they're lotus. They're like eating their lotus there by looking at these things. So yeah, we're already in the land of leisure. Leisure is a big portion of our time and of our work. And the question is whether we can live on leisure alone. Can man live on leisure alone? Which is, maybe you can add it to those three questions I asked at the beginning, just add them to it. Is leisure, the leisure economy, does that have any future whatsoever? Okay, here's the ending. Okay, last point. Okay, scientists are building a black box to record the end of civilization. I think there's a feeling out there, like a sixth sense that lots of people have, that something is not right, that we're like close to the end of the world, to the end of man, extinction of man. And so we have all these theories about extinction. We have movies about extinction. We have books written about it, different scenarios, right? And these people developed a black box. What is this about? Well, the black box is going to supposedly record all the temperature, the economy, everything around us, especially related to climate change, right? So that when we're gone, The black box records all this and holds it for whom? Well, it holds it for a future generation. Now, it could be a future generation or the Klingons when they visit Earth and they say, well, what happened to these humans? And they look in the record and they say, oh, we found the black box. And the black box tells them, oh, this was what happened towards the end. Okay. And again, all these people are thinking of climate primarily because you see there it says it's going to measure the temperature, energy, and all this other good stuff, the CO2 levels and so on. And so they thought about this black box that's going to record all this. And one of the issues that this brings up, was there ever a previous generation of humans or animals before the new, like before the Cambrian or Precambrian? Was there another era in which there were humans, for example, or animals or plants? And will there be another one after we're gone? Let's just hypothesize, right? Let's say that humans are going to become extinct. Okay. Well, let's make that assumption. Will there be some other generation of humans that are born millions or billions of years in the future here on Earth? Or will the Earth turn into a Mars or Venus type planet with just a bunch of CO2, no more life, maybe a runaway greenhouse effect kills everything and then becomes a barren stone that everything else is, the moon, Mercury, and so on. How is the Earth going to end up after the extinction of man? Okay, another question for you. Okay, let's get on with the subject matter today, and the subject matter is power. What the hell is power? It turns out that power has something to do with energy, and energy has something to do with mass. So we have all this connection there, right? I've held that no one has any idea what energy is. Okay, and so let's begin there and let's find out what energy is. Then maybe we can find out if anyone knows what mass is. And I'm going to show that according to some of the questions, some of the issues people raised, some of the comments people made, lots of people are still stuck on this mass issue. They have no idea what mass is. And if power depends on energy, which depends on mass, or they're all related somehow, well, the question is whether we're going to learn anything about power. Okay, so this is the subject matter today. So let's begin with an article that came out, okay, the other day. And even though the article was brought up the other day in the beginning of December, first week of December, it dates the idea and the original article dates for about a year ago. Okay, so it's like 1 year old already, but that's irrelevant. The point is what this individual says, what he states about energy. Okay, so let's begin there. Here we have it. So it says, fragments of energy, not waves or particles, may be the fundamental building blocks of the universe. He's a professor of mechanical aerospace engineering in North Carolina State University, Larry Silverberg. And this gentleman says that there's something called energy out there, and it's these fragments, the debris of energy that makes up matter. It's not particles, it's not waves, as you've always been told. And remember, he's a PhD, right? He's a professor. Okay? And the article says, this fellow says, matter is what makes up the universe, but what makes up matter? Yeah, good question. What makes up matter? I thought it was atoms, right? And this fellow says, my colleague, Jeffrey Eischen, and I have described an updated way to think about matter. Whoa, good. We propose that matter is not made of particles or waves. Love that. What is it made of? It was long thought, but more fundamentally, the matter is made of fragments of energy. Okay, and here it is. If you always wanted to know what energy looks like, here we have it. Okay, I want you to see it. There it is. This is what he thinks energy is. These are the lines of energy. Okay, they swirl around, I guess. And he says new mathematics have shown that the lines of energy can be used to describe the universe. Okay, so he's saying that what underlines all matter is energy. Do we know what energy is? Okay, that's the question. Okay, and here you see dynamic version of energy. I want you to be careful because it's going to run into your eyes. There it is. Okay, you see all that energy just flowing into your eyes. Okay, so this is what the universe is made out of. I guess it's divided in two parts. The bottom half has the energy, and the top half has the stars. This is how they conceptualize the universe. A little surrealistic, but yeah, this is their vision of energy. Okay, so now you know what energy looks like, what it is, and it's fragments of this stuff that's flowing into your eyes or that swirls around, all these lines of energy. That's what makes up matter. And so the question is, what are these lines of energy? Are they physical entities? Because, I mean, they draw them as lines. Whether they come into your eyes or swirl around, they're just lines. So what are these lines? I mean, forget about energy. If energy is just a bunch of lines, we got to go to the line. We got to go to the bottom of the pile and find out, what makes up the energy. What are these lines? It's like saying field. What is a field? Well, field is this region where we have numbers. Okay, but then numbers are not physical objects, so there's no physical object called field. And this is something similar. If energy is made out of all these swirling lines or lines that come straight into your eyes or whatever, what are the lines? Forget about energy. We need to figure out what the lines are. Okay, you have a magnetic field again, lines of force. We need to find out what those lines of force are. Forget about the field. The field is a bunch of lines of force. Now we need to figure out what the lines are. That's the way it works in science and physics. Okay, you can't just say, well, they're just a bunch of lines of force and we just use them to describe the field or something in there. No, we got to get to the bottom of it. We got to find out what those lines of force are. We have to find that needle in the haystack. Okay, that's the way it works. Anyways, we don't have to go too far, and I've shown this before. We have Mr. Feynman. He says it is important to realize that in physics today, we have no knowledge of what energy is. Okay, so he's saying he doesn't know what energy is. Obviously, energy is not a what. It's not a thing, because energy is defined as a concept. It's defined as capacity, the ability. There's no physical standalone object called ability or capacity. So that's where the whole thing ends, because you can't define something as capacity and then say you're going to move the capacity or kick it around, like if you kicked a something. So either we have these lines of energy, which are some kind of, I don't know, some string, some little thread of some kind, right? Or we define the term and say, it's capacity. It's a mathematical concept and nothing but. One of the two. And yeah, because they don't know what energy is, and Mr. Feynman says, well, I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics. Do not keep asking yourself if you can possibly avoid it, but how can it be like that? Nobody knows how it can be like that. The more you see how strangely nature behaves, the harder it is to make a model that explains how even the simplest phenomena actually work. So theoretical physics has given up on that. Okay? Tremendous statement from a Nobel Prize winner in so-called mathematics, mathematical physics. So yeah, we don't have any idea what energy is, because energy is not a what. Energy is a mathematical concept. And if it's a concept, it's not a thing. It's not a standalone thing. And so this other fellow, professor, whatever, who says that matter is made out of fragments of energy, well, that really stretches the imagination, because here we have a Nobel Prize that I'm sure outranks this professor, this good professor, and tells him that there is no such thing as energy. And if you don't know what energy is and you're going to explain everything with energy, then we have a problem. And the problem is what Feynman just said. Nobody understands quantum mechanics. No kidding. if you want to understand it, at least define your terms or separate the objects from the concepts and say, look, this is an object and this is a concept. So if you're going to talk about an object, illustrate it, point to it, name it. If you're going to talk about a concept, define it. That's how simple it is. But if you don't have a definition and you say, well, it's a physical object, but I can't illustrate it because it's the capacity, then we have a problem. Of course, he's not going to understand anything about the universe because mathematical physics already has the seeds of its own destruction. Its foundations are rotten to the core. That's what happens. And so what happens? Well, it turns out energy is just another form of mass. Oh my God. So we don't know what energy is. Now we're going to get to mass. Are we going to find out what mass is if mass is just another form of energy? Well, we don't know what energy is. It's not a what, it's a concept. And now we're going to figure out what mass is. Is mass a physical object? Is it a concept? Is it a mathematical concept? What is mass? And I tried to explain a little bit about mass in the last few lectures, but some people are very hard at hearing. They're very hard of understanding. And so let's see if we can go through some of this again. And I'm sorry for those people who have to put up with all this, but I need to clarify some points so that that people at least find out what the arguments are. Okay, mass is a big word, so so is energy, and force, field. Those are very big words in mathematical physics. We need to destroy them. We need to utterly destroy them because people have the idea that these are physical standalone objects that they can move around. They talk about moving the mass and transferring the energy and stretching the field or vibrating the field. You can't do that because these are mathematical concepts. Okay? And so, people have these lousy notions in their head because this is what they were brainwashed. This is what they learned by rote in high school. Primarily in high school, and then later on reinforced in college. Okay, I know because I took a lot of college physics courses, and and it was driven deep inside me, and I didn't, come up to speed until later on when I got out of college. That's when I started doing research. Okay, so here one fellow says mass is a measure of how much matter, how many atoms, right? He clarifies that mass is a measure of how much matter there is in an object. How many atoms? Okay, keep that in mind. The amount of matter it contains is measured on a scale. Okay, we can then calculate a very close approximation of how many atoms there are. Okay, it's known as a mole. Okay, fine. So we can calculate how many atoms there are. If mass is how many atoms, his own words, right? Then all he's got to do is state mass in terms of how many atoms, okay? According to his own definition, this requires him to state his results in terms of how many atoms. You cannot say that mass is 1 kilogram. You got to say mass is 500 atoms or 500 units of mass or whatever you want to call it, okay? But he's got to state his how many atoms in terms of a number followed by units or atoms or whatever, because that's his definition. That's his notion. So he can't say mass is 1 kilogram. That's my point. Okay, you got to state it in number of atoms, which is what he's stating is the definition. Okay, so we know now what mass is. Mass is the quantity of matter, and it should be stated in number of apples and not in kilograms of apples. Okay, continues, he says, when you drop something from a height onto a scale, it has an acceleration, that is weight. Okay, so he's saying weight is something dynamic. You're dropping it. As it falls, we call that weight. That's what he's saying. When it hits the scale, that is mass. Okay, so hits the scale means now it's stay there, okay? It's pressing down on the scale. The scale goes no further. We have a static situation, and he's going to call that one mass, which again, what are we talking about? Quantity of matter, which is what he said before. How many atoms? That's mass, okay? And what he's saying is that weight is something dynamic, okay, that as the elephant falls. That's weight because that's the pull of gravity on the object. Whereas that once it hits the scale and moves no more, now it's standing still essentially with respect to the scale. Now we call that mass because we can say, well, that's 1 kilogram. That's his notion. So mass is quantity of matter. We're essentially measuring by saying kilograms how many atoms the thing has, whereas weight is the pull of gravity. And of course, the pull of gravity is different on the moon for the same object than it is here on the Earth. Okay? So that's the difference they want to give you. The notion that the mathematicians from Newton all the way to today to Stephen Hawking and passing through Einstein, all these people had the same notion. Okay? So I just want you to understand what they understood by mass and weight. And the example always given is that if you take whatever weight here on Earth, say the Le Grand Kilo, used to be the standard of the kilogram, if you took that grand kilo, right, kilo, to the moon, it would have a different weight because the pull of gravity on the moon is different than here on Earth, and therefore the weight changed, but the mass, the number of atoms, remained the same. Do we understand each other? Okay, we're saying that the elephant that's falling there, he would weigh different on the moon. The acceleration of gravity on him would be different, even though the guy is the same guy that's sitting on the scale on the right-hand side. The number of atoms that comprise him are just the same. Nothing has changed in the structure, in the number of atoms that the elephant has. I hope I'm getting through to someone out there, okay? Okay, so this is the notion, okay? And then again, we have some people out there who don't share this notion or learn something different at their monastery. Okay, here we have, Paul says, mass isn't the quantity of atoms in an object. Okay, so we have a different opinion here. This guy went to a different school, I guess, okay? It is the quality of matter that resists changes in its momentum. Well, no, first of all, nothing in mathematics is qualitative, and mass is considered a quantitative, both mass and weight are considered quantitative parameters. They're not qualitative at all, okay? But this guy raises the issue that it's the quality of matter, some kind of quality. So he says, no one is claiming that the number of atoms in an object moving at an appreciable fraction of the speed of light is going up. Okay, so what are they saying? It says that quality of all atoms in that object is increasing. Okay, so this is another version. You can see people are very mixed up on what mass is. And of course, when you define mass and say it's the quantity of matter, some people don't like it because it destroys their religion. What is it specifically destroying? Well, it's destroying Einstein's notion that if an object moves close to the speed of light, that's what special relativity says, mass increases, known as relativistic mass, right? Relativistic mass is an object that accelerates, usually in the context of special relativity, accelerates at near the speed of light, and as it approaches the speed of light, its mass increases. So once again, what increased? The number of atoms, which is the rest mass, or is it the weight, how much it presses up against the scale? Okay, which one is mass? These are two different notions. And we usually weigh a person and say, oh, this is your weight. And they say, well, that's the notion of ordinary speech. That's the popular notion. It's not the real super duper scientific notion. Okay, let's find out. Let's keep going. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of this weight mass dichotomy. Okay, here it is. We have, fellow says, weight is a force. Okay, let's find out. Which is a vector. We're going to get into that in a little while, but vector essentially is that little arrow that the mathematicians draw, which has magnitude and direction. Direction being a qualitative concept. Okay, direction. There's no number you can put for direction. You can't say 5 and understand, or 5 units of whatever, and think that that's got direction of any kind. In fact, that's exactly the opposite. When you have 5 followed by a unit, that's usually a scalar, what is known as a scalar, and he says that there. He says it has magnitude and direction, and mass, on the other hand, is a scalar. So what are we saying here? We're saying that in the first case, we're talking about gravitational pull, okay? And that's what force is, using Newton's equation of force, right? Weight is a force, according to this fellow, meaning it's dynamic, okay? Because force is dynamic, okay? And mass, on the other hand, is a scalar, meaning it has no direction, okay? So one has direction, the other one doesn't, okay? What is weight? Weight is the action of gravity on an object. That's what Newton's equation says, okay? But is it a force, first of all, or is it a tension? And I'm saying it's not a force, it's a tension, and tension is not a force. Tension, no one wins a tug of war. Tension does not have direction. Force is a vector, has direction, tension does not. Okay, so the question is, that equation there, mass divided by distance squared, okay, does that have direction? And the answer, no. What we have right there is a static situation where we have two masses, the Earth and the moon. We take a snapshot of that. It's a snapshot right there. It's a static situation, no motion. And at that point, we have weight. What is weight? There you have the equation. The separation between two objects. We're taking a snapshot to calculate that value, called weight. Okay? And what we have is just distance between them. Separation, not distance traveled. No one's traveling. Nothing's moving. It's a snapshot. It's a static situation. All we have is a separation between the center of mass, right, of the two objects. All we have is distance, not distance traveled. Okay? And that's the calculation. Okay, so that is a tension. That's not a force, because there is no motion. There is no vector. There is no direction to tension. It's just a static situation. Think of it as a dumbbell, okay? Two weights separated by a stick made of a single piece. That's tension. When you pull the rubber band to a maximum that you can stretch it, that's the maximum tension. That's called tension, when you can't move it any further. Okay, so the maximum stretch on a rubber band, we'll call that tension. You can't move it any further. And it's like if you had something separating, for example, your two fingers, that's made of a single piece. That's what it amounts to. That's what tension is, and that's what that equation says. There's only distance separation between two objects. Okay, so weight is not a force then, not according to that equation. Okay, because that's not a vector. The other equation, Newton's second law, that is a force, because there is direction in that equation. There is no direction in this equation of force, which is not force, which is tension, and that's what weight is. It's a value for a given location. Weight is location specific, okay? And so here we have another situation that clarifies this. We have Newton's gravitation equation states that you have weight before anything is accelerated, okay? Weight is location specific, and location is a static concept, okay? That's what the equation says. Weight, meaning tension, is separation between two masses. That's all it is. And all we're saying is that the astronaut there, he weighs 100 kilograms on Earth. You take him a little farther back, out, and for a given location, no motion, snapshot, okay, separation, he weighs now 50 kilograms at that location. If he moves a millimeter, he's going to have a different weight. So again, weight is location specific. You move him farther out, he weighs only 25 kilograms at that location. He moves an inch, all bets are off. He no longer weighs 25 kilograms. He may weigh 25.1 or 24.9. No longer does he weigh 25 kilograms. Only for a given location with respect to the center of the mass of the earth, right, does he have 25 kilograms. Okay? Do we understand that? And the only way you can explain that is, here's the illustration for that, okay, is because all the ropes, and here we are converging upon him from the earth. Every atom on earth is bound to every atom in his body. So as he is closer to the earth, the ropes fan out, and so he has more weight. He has a greater acceleration towards the earth at that location. Again, it's an acceleration, but we're talking about a given location in which that 50 kilograms is valid, for example, or the 25 kilograms is valid. Once he's closer to the earth, obviously he has a different weight. Okay? The only way you can explain this is if every atom in his body is bound to every atom on earth, first of all. Second, you can see that in this case, I've only put one atom connected to every atom on earth, or even to many atoms, not even to every atom, because you wouldn't see anything if I put all the connections there. But you can see what's happening. You have more ropes fanning out as you approach the earth. That's what it's all about. And that explains weight, and it shows that weight is location specific. Okay, so yeah, the point here is that weight is not something dynamic. Weight is location specific, and what that means is that it's a static concept. Weight is not something dynamic. You don't have to put something on a scale, except in all these experimentalists who think that it's a question of pressing down on the scale. That's how we measure weight and mass, both of them. We measure them by weighing them, right? Whether here or on the moon. And if conceptually mass is the quantity of matter, we have no idea how many atoms it has, which is the way you would have to specify your result of mass. You would have to say 500 trillion atoms. Then that would be mass. That's the way you would have to specify mass. You can't say mass is measured and mass is 1 kilogram. No, that's known as weight. Okay? And now let's do a little thought experiment that clarifies, I think, even further this whole thing. Einstein said that if you travel close to the speed of light, okay, your mass increases. You say, well, hold it. What do you mean mass increases? Am I gaining more pounds? Meaning, am I weighing more? Am I having more atoms, which would be mass? Or am I just weighing more because as you fall, for example, towards an object, towards a celestial object, say you're falling towards a star, right? Well, you're accelerating because gravity is something that accelerates you towards the center of that object, right? So you're accelerating now, let's say close to the speed of light. Did you gain more pounds? Did you gain more atoms? Or is it simply that your weight increases, that the acceleration of gravity on your atoms is what producing this acceleration, this speed, this increase in speed as you fall towards the object? Okay, so here, let's illustrate what I'm saying here. Okay, picture's worth 1,000 words, where a movie is worth 1,000,000 words. Okay, so let's go with a movie. Okay, so we save a lot here. Here we have two objects. Okay, they're exactly alike. It's the same object on the right and on the left. Okay, and they have the same number of atoms. But as you can see, the one on the left is accelerating faster than the one on the right. And that's because the object on the star, okay, in this case, the one on the left has more mass. Okay, it's got more atoms. Therefore, it's producing an acceleration on the object that makes it go at 99% of the speed of light. And the other one, almost the same, but not quite. It's 95% of the speed of light. Okay? So the only difference here is not the two objects that are falling. The difference here is just the object that's underneath. okay, the star in this case. And think of it again as the moon. You know, if you take the Grand Kilo from here to the moon, it's going to have a different acceleration. So even though it's at the same distance from the ground that it was here on Earth, it falls at a different rate because the acceleration of gravity over there is different. Okay, so that's what I'm illustrating here. So we have one acceleration that forces this object to travel near the speed of light at 99% of the speed of light, and the other one is falling at 95% of the speed of light. The objects are the same. They have the same number of atoms. Okay, so is Einstein going to say that this is relativistic mass, or are we talking about weight here? Because this is what they illustrate when they say, look, this is weight. The mass is the same, but when you take it to the moon, the mass remained the same, but the weight changed. Okay, so now we have that situation here. Are we talking about relativistic mass, or are we talking about weight? This is the question. And of course, this is something that Einstein never figured out. In fact, no mathematician figured out that what they're talking about is weight. So whenever they refer to relativistic mass, what they're really talking about is weight. We're saying that if an object falls at 99% speed of light, and the other one 95% of the speed of light, they're talking towards an object, a celestial object, they're talking about weight. They're not talking about relativistic mass, whatever mass is. They just created this unnecessary concept called relativistic mass to say that an object accelerates when it goes near the speed of light. Yeah, it's known as weight. We've known that for many years now. Okay, and I guess Mr. Einstein never figured that out. He wasn't smart enough. Okay, so we don't know what energy is. Mass is another form of energy. We don't know what mass is because mass is measured. That's how we determine mass. We don't give our results in terms of quantity of atoms. We give it in terms of kilograms, which is a measurement and not counting. There's a difference between measuring and counting. So we don't know what energy is. We don't know what mass is. Turns out power, the subject matter of today, has something to do with energy, which has something to do with mass. So I'm sorry to tell you that we're going to be in deep trouble today. We won't know what power is, but let's give it our best shot. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of power, which is another important parameter that they use in mathematics, known as mathematics, or some people know as mathematical so-called physics. Okay, here it is. We went through these different parameters. Force, mass, weight, acceleration, distance traveled, which is not the same thing as distance. Okay, distance in physics is separation. Distance traveled is a parameter that belongs exclusively to mathematical physics because they're going to put a number for that. They're going to tell you in meters or in seconds how far you went, etc. You know, so distance traveled is a measure of mathematics. It has nothing to do with physics. Physics, separation. That's qualitative. Physics is 150% qualitative and nothing but. Okay, we don't use numbers in physics. Okay, velocity, speed. What was the difference? Well, velocity has direction. Speed doesn't. Okay, but then we have the problem when you turn a corner. They want to talk about velocity, and they say, well, the velocity changed. Well, what do you mean the velocity changed? Did the direction change? Yeah. The speed remained the same, but the direction changed. But direction is a qualitative concept, and so we have a problem there because that doesn't belong to mathematics. Okay, so we have a problem with velocity. Okay. Anyways, it's again a parameter that belongs exclusively to mathematical physics. It doesn't belong to science or to physics. Physics, we're interested in explanations and not in measurements or quantitative values of any kind. Work, energy, and temperature. Today we do power. Okay, well, let's see what power is. Let's find out. One good way of getting to the bottom of that is finding out what the definition of power is. Let's find out the definition. Here it is. Power, the amount of energy. Energy, ooh, that's spirit. Transferred or converted per unit time. And there you have one equation. You would think it's the only equation. You're going to be surprised. Okay, so what is it? Power is equal to energy divided by time. Straightforward, easy stuff. Just memorize it. Take the test on Friday and you won't have any problem. You won't get hurt. Okay, but what are we talking about in terms of physics? What is this? Well, energy is the capacity, the ability. Okay, that's the definition of that. So that's what you put. We got to put the word capacity on top of where the E is, right? What is the little t? Well, that's time. What is time? Is what a clock measures. Okay, that's very important because clock is what a device that measures time. So we seem to have a circular definition or argument here. I mean, what have we learned with this? Power equals energy divided by time. We have no idea what energy is. We really don't have an idea what time is. There's no definition. Mathematicians tell you they don't know what time is. And then you have these definitions which are circular. So far, it's like son comes home and father says, hey, son, so what did you learn in college today? I said, well, not much, Dad, not much. All I did was learn that P is equal to E over T. Okay, great. Memorize it and you're done, Okay, and so it turns out that we have more equations for this same parameter. We thought that power was energy over time, transfer of energy, conversion of energy, whatever. And now we find out that it's also force multiplied by speed, velocity, in parentheses, okay? This is not I took this out of there, okay, from someone else. Okay, so this is from the PhDs, okay? And there's your equation. P equals force times velocity. Okay, so that's a little different than E over T. Now we have F times V. Okay, little v, okay? Big F times V. Okay, does it stop there? No, power is also W over delta T. What is the W? It's work. And what is the delta T? Elapsed time. And then you find other forms of power, other flavors, okay? Electric power. What is that? Well, that's P is power equal to V times I, voltage times intensity of current, or intensity squared times resistance, or V squared over R, voltage squared over resistance. So we have all these equations, they're all power. What the hell is power? I mean, which one of the, will the real power please stand up? Okay, we have all these versions of power. I'm lost already. I wanted to get to the bottom of power, but all I have is all these versions of power, and they call every one of these flavors, they call them power. Electric power, and wattage power, and work power, and force power. They have all these powers. Okay. Let's see if we can improve on that. It turns out it only gets worse. Okay. It says power is a scalar quantity. Scalar? What the hell is a scalar? Well, a scalar is a physical quantity. A physical quantity. See, it's not an abstract quantity. It's a real physical one that you can hold in your hand. It's a quantity that you have there in your hands. That is completely described by its magnitude. Okay? No such monster in physics as a physical quantity. Okay, let's clarify that. What is a vector? Well, it's kind of something extra. And it's a geometric object, it says. Object? What do you mean an object? A geometric object. Vector is an object. Oh, I think they mean an arrow. Like an engine arrow that you shoot. Is that what an object is? That's what a vector is, an arrow? Yeah, it's a geometric object. No, it's a mathematical concept, not a geometric object. No such thing as objects in mathematics, in mathematical physics. Okay? They have no objects. They never defined the word object, so they can't have objects. With both length and direction. Okay, length and direction is not an object. Length and direction do not an object make. Two concepts do not an object make. Okay, so no. If a vector's length and direction, magnitude and direction, we still don't have an object. So don't call it an object. But the point here is that these two notions are different. Scalar is a quantity, and the other one is a quantity with direction. That's the bottom line. That's the difference between a scalar and a vector. Okay? Okay, and so let's continue. Let's find out. Maybe we've learned something today. I don't know. Quantities such as force and velocity have both magnitude and direction and are called vectors. Okay, so here we have a scalar. Power is called a scalar. Okay, says so there, right? What is this power equal to? This scalar equal to? Well, it's equal to two vectors. So we multiply two vectors in this example. Force, which is a vector, times velocity, which is a vector, and we end up with something that has no direction, a scalar. Okay, so when you multiply two vectors that have direction, you end up with directionless scalar. Okay, great. We learned a lot these days. Okay, let's find out if this is true, because it says there, examples of scalars are volume, density, speed, energy, mass, and time. Okay, now we know. Those are all scalars. Please memorize this for the test on Friday. Okay, what are the scalars? Volume, density, speed, energy, mass, and time. Got it? Memorize them? Okay, let's continue. Let's find out. Okay, let's find out if this is true. And we look it up, and it says that time has direction. It's got a little arrow there. It's going up. You see time. This is on the light cone that they call in mathematical physics. It's one of their sacred icons. You got to pray to this. And it has time going up in a direction. In fact, they talk about the arrow of time, and they talk about time having direction. And you're saying, what do you mean direction? Yeah, it's a vector. It's a coordinate. It's got an arrow. That's what that arrowhead points to. It's giving you direction. And the direction is forward. Now, is there such a thing as a forward direction? Okay? Is this the issue? And, who's forward? Your forward or my forward? I mean, what are we talking about when we say forward? And they say, well, to the future. Well, is that a forward? What kind of direction is the future? Point to it. Okay? And then the other one is tension. I mean, is tension a scalar? Okay? Because, again, tension means that you have a single piece thingy that's separating two objects. Or you can say something stretched to the limits, which again is a static constant. That's what tension is. No one's winning the tug of war. Nothing is moving under so-called tension. And so the question is tension a scalar or is it a vector? And again, they say that tension is a force. Force is a vector. So are we going to say that tension is also a vector? Which direction is tension pointing to? Which again takes us to weight, which is a tension, which is valid for a single point in space. If you want to use that language, we say it's for a single location, okay, with respect to all matter in the universe. Weight is only valid for a given location in the universe. Once you move that object, it has different weight with respect to every single object in the universe. Known as Mach's principle, everything pulls on you in the universe, or you're bound to everything in the universe. Okay, so I think we're learning a little bit about, maybe not about power, because we still have no idea what power is, but it's a scalar, whatever that is, okay? We have this thing called power that has no direction. But they have all these other things that have direction, such as tension, which is supposedly a force, which has direction, and time, which they say has direction, but they say is a scalar. So you try to figure it out, okay? Here are the conclusions, okay? That's all I can give you today for power. Use it more likely in politics than in physics, okay? Because you're never going to find out what power is. What are the conclusions? Okay, power is the transfer conversion of energy, according to their own words, where energy is an adjective or adverb. Power is a scalar, no direction, okay? Made of quantities like force and velocity, which have direction. Yeah, you can have different directions for this and they could cancel out all that stuff. It doesn't matter. My point is that here you have this thing, power, known as a scalar, but it also has the word time in there, which they say, well, it's a scalar, but it turns out time does have direction, according to mathematical physics. And then you have weight, which again they say is a force, which is supposedly a scalar, but it turns out force, weight is a tension, and tension does not have direction. So those are things that the mathematical physicists never discovered because they do equations, but they don't understand the concepts, the physical concepts that underlie the concepts that they created for mathematics to do measurement and numbers. Okay, power is made of time, which the mathematicians claim is a scalar quantity, but this one has direction, okay? Because they claim both, that it's a scalar, but that it has direction. So now we don't even know what a scalar is, because a scalar supposedly is a number without direction. And then, like energy and mass, there are several types or flavors of power. So you figure out what power means or is, okay? Corollary, power is another convenient and powerful word of mathematical physics, mathematics, right? That describes everything and explains absolutely nothing. Okay, so I hope you learned what power is, okay? Now you can tell your little kid, oh, I can tell you what power is in politics. Let's get to some of the questions, comments people made. Had a lot of them, and a lot of them had to do with the word object. Remember, what does Bill Gates say? He says that the word object, the definition of the word object, the scientific, the definition of physics, right, of the word object destroys all religions. That word is so powerful. And of course, all these people rebel because eventually they end up at the word object, also at the word exist, by the way. And at that point, they realize something is wrong about their theory, because it turns out that they weren't using objects, they were using words such as energy and field and mass, and they've treated them as objects. They reified them, okay, turned them into something concrete. Turns out they were talking about an abstract mathematical concept, which they reified. And of course, at that point, they say, well, no, we don't like that definition. And there's only one way to fight that definition, and it is coming up with a definition you can defend. If you cannot defend your definition, I'm sorry, but your religion dies right there and then. Okay? That's how we treat it in science. You may want to raise issues of authority, of democracy, and say, well, everybody on earth believes that it's see and touch. That's what authority says. All these Nobel Prize winners, they say it's see and touch. The philosophers say that. Tradition says it. We follow tradition. No, not in science. In science, we have to define in such a way that we can use it consistently. And if you don't like the definition because it destroys your religion, you have only one recourse, and that's to get inside the ring and fight for your definition with shield and sword. Okay, so here it goes. One fellow says, well, along these lines, right? So speed is the time rate at which an object is moving along a path, while velocity is the rate and direction and of an object's movement. And another fellow says, answers to him, says, velocity doesn't make sense squared. Yeah, because what happens is squaring direction doesn't have meaning. Why? Because direction is a qualitative concept. What are you going to do with direction? Are you going to square it? Are you going to say, I'm going to take the square root of direction, or take it to the power of 3 or something along those lines? No, are you going to add direction? Yeah, we have a problem with considering velocity, because when you square velocity, you're also squaring direction. And that's something the mathematicians do all the time without paying attention to direction, except when they say, well, the object turned a corner. Now it's going around the Earth. The Earth is going around the sun, so it's accelerating. What do you mean it's accelerating? The speed didn't change. The Earth always travels at the same speed. Yeah, what changed was the direction. What do you mean the direction? Well, what happened was this, and again, I've illustrated that in the past. Let's go over it again. Let's put it over here. Okay, here you have an object, and what is speed? Distance divided by time, okay? But that's not the distance of physics. It's not separation. We're talking about distance traveled. We're talking about a number followed by units like meters or feet or whatever, okay? Speed is quantitative, but direction is qualitative. And you can probably square the speed, no problem there, but can you square direction? And why is that important? Well, because you have their velocity of something that's going around in circles. When it goes straight, no problem. You know, because you're not paying attention to direction. You don't have to worry too much about that. It's when you have to go in circles because they say the speed is the same, but the thing accelerated. What do you mean? I thought acceleration was an increase in speed. And they say, no, when you go around in circles like the mathematicians do, what changes the direction, which is a qualitative concept, okay? And what are we talking about? We're talking about centripetal acceleration. Anyways, it's factored in that change in direction. So you're factoring acceleration anyways in there because that's what causes the change in direction, okay? But the question comes, you know, when you try to square these things, when you square velocity, are you also squaring the direction when you do these calculations? Are you squaring the qualitative concept? Same when you take the square root, by the way. You know, you're doing the same thing in reverse. And here we see it, okay? Here's good old Einstein's notion, okay? And what is he saying? He's saying that a photon, when it goes around a mass, such as a star, well, it says that the mass of the star bends space-time, warps space-time, and the poor little photon has no choice but to turn the corner there, you know, swerves around, right? It changes its direction because of mass, because it rolls around space-time, so to speak, or slides along space-time, warped space-time, and so it wants to go straight, but somehow it finds this curved wall along which it has to travel. That's the notion they have. So yeah, the little photon is a little mass, I guess, or a massless mass that can swerve, so it doesn't go straight. Okay, it swerves, it changes its direction, and so the question is, you know, when they do a squaring of velocity, like velocity of light, and light turns a corner or swerves like it did there, it deflects from its rectilinear path. Are we squaring the direction also? A qualitative concept? Ooh, I'll let you think about that one. It's beyond my intelligence. I don't have an IQ of 200 like this guy had. I only have one of like 10 or 20, you know. I'm very modest. Okay, little brain, you know. Okay. Calculating work on an inclined plane. So the guy sends me to a link, says this shows why we don't have to deal with the angle in the calculation. Okay, the calculation of work. Remember, work equals force times distance, and we're saying that's force times distance times the cosine of the angle, alpha or whatever, theta. And why? Because it's not the same thing to have a force on a horizontal plane than it is going up a mountain. So you need to know that angle to find out, you know, what the force is going to be. It's not going to be the same force pushing a box straight ahead, assuming there's no friction, for example, to make things easy, then pushing it up a mountain. Okay, same distance, but the force is different that you have to apply to something going up. This guy hasn't figured that out. Okay. And so we have to clarify it for him. Here it is, okay? If you go to that site, you find this, Simple Machines Inclined Plane. And this fellow makes the same error, maybe he just wasn't aware of what he was doing. He says work is force times distance, okay? Fine, but you can see the force changes from the purple on the left to the blue, light blue on the right. He's got 200 newtons in one case and he's got 40 newtons in another. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the same distance, first of all, okay? One on an inclined plane, the other one is in a horizontal plane. And then if we're going to leave the force exactly the like in both cases, 200 newtons times 6 meters, well, we're not going to have the same work if you go up the mountain than if you go on a horizontal plane. Okay, so yeah, the equation does have to have this cosine because you have to know what the angle is in order to calculate the force. The force is going to be different. It's factored in those 200 newtons or in whatever force you got there. The reason you see that there's a change in force from 40 newtons to 200 newtons is because the angle is already included in that value. That's what's happened there. Okay, and this fellow hasn't figured that out. So he has the wrong notion. We're not talking about change in the force. We're saying for the same force, same distance, it's not the same thing as going up a mountain as going straight. That's what we're saying. And the example he showed there has nothing to do with that. Okay, it's a totally different example. Okay, another fellow says, heat is a form of ether. I don't know what ether this guy's smelling lately, but I don't know. It says bouncing particles? Nope. Okay, let's find out. Here's the ether, okay, defined. Ether, according to, and these are definitions you'll find out there, the material that fills region of the universe beyond the terrestrial sphere. Okay, this is what the Greeks thought of the ether. This is out of the Wikipedia, I think. And there's another one, notion, and this is the 19th century notion, which they used to talk about light, the motion of what light was, okay, the vibration of the ether. It says the postulated medium for the propagation of light, the existence of an invisible and infinite what? Material with no interaction with physical objects. So we're talking about a material. Is this material made of a single piece? Well, I don't think so, because if this material were made out of a single piece, meaning there is no space in there, in between, there's just a single rock or a single block, nothing would be moving. There would be no vibration of any internal part because it's made out of a single piece. Therefore, this material is obviously made of parts which are vibrating, means each little part, each little particle is surrounded by space, which is what this little particle can move into because there's nothing there. So this infinite material is made of little particles, of parts, of segments, however you want to call it. I'll call it particles. How's that? We're saying that this thing they call ether is a bunch of particles. That's all it is. They want to say it's infinite, fine. They want to say it's finite, that's fine. I don't care. Either way. The point is that this ether is made of particles. And these people never figured it out. Yeah, they are bouncing particles. And here you have Mr. Robert Laughlin, and he's a Nobel laureate, and he says the following. He says, the modern concept of the vacuum of space, confirmed every day by experiment, is a relativistic ether. But we do not call it this because it is taboo. They all called it... I was cut off there, I think, by YouTube. I hope I'm still here. They said they reconnected me. Okay, fine. Anyway, let me repeat what I just said, just in case. Einstein, all these people, they had an ether. Everybody, we've never abandoned, mathematical physics has never abandoned the ether. From the days of Newton, from the days of Descartes, going all the way to Plato, no one has ever done anything except the ether. They always considered space to be filled with a bunch of particles. That bunch of particles, each particle surrounded by space, by nothing, is what that whole bunch of particles is what they call ether. Here it is illustrated for anyone who has who wants to know what ether looks like. Okay, here's what the ether looks like. Now this is a finite ether. Other people have an infinite ether, whatever that is, particles extending forever. But that's what the ether was in the 19th century and still is today. the vibration of photons is the vibration of a bunch of particles known that form the ether in the background. And it's those same particles which the mathematicians claim to produce in the labs, positive and negative. They bring them into existence again, meaning that they bring them out of space, empty space, so-called empty space, which is not empty at all. It's got all this energy, all these particles, and all these particles are vibrating. You pull one of those particles from space, of which space is made, right? And you turn them into two particles, one positive, one negative. So yeah, the ether has never been abandoned by mathematical physics. Everybody thinks that space is made of particles. And that's what the ether has always been. So anyone who has a different definition, don't tell me I'm wrong. Okay, that's not the answer. The answer is, tell me what's right. What do you think is the ether? Define the word ether. And hopefully you don't define it, because that automatically makes it into a concept. Hopefully you can draw it and point to it and say, this is the ether, like I did there more or less, except that an object is not a bunch of particles. An object is that which has shape. And so if you say that that whole shebang that I just showed is the ether, fine, because you can point to it and say this is where it ends. We'll call that bundle of gas, which is what it looks like, a bunch of particles just floating around in space. If you call that the ether, then treat the whole ether as a thing and not tell me that there's a part of it that vibrates, and that's light. No, that's not what the ether is. Ether is the whole thing. If you're going to say the ether vibrates, you're vibrating the whole elephant, not the little atoms that of which the elephant is comprised. Okay, so we have to understand the context here. Okay, the context is, if you're going to talk about gas like air, and you say the air in the balloon, okay, that's an object. Why is it an object? Because it's made out of particles? No. It's because you treat the whole gas as a single blob. Okay, and so you release it in space, all these atoms, and you'll say air. You point to it and say air. Let's assume you can see it, color-coded, whatever. So you point to that whole blob and you call that air or gas or whatever word you want to use. No problem. You can call it X if you want. Okay, and that is an object. And you got to treat it as a single object. You can't say, well, you know, all these particles that make up the air, that's the air. No, no. That's mereology. That's what something is made out of, and that's not what a thing is, what an object is. An object is that which has shape. You got to treat the whole thing. And the same thing here. Okay, so if the ether is this gas made of particles, fine, we don't care. We're going to look at the whole thing and say this is the ether, the whole thing, the whole shape, if it's an object. If you're going to say, well, it's a bunch of these little particles that move, that's not an object. Now you got to talk about the particles, not about the ether. Ether is the whole shebang, the whole elephant, not what it's made of. I hope somebody understood. Okay, here we have another issue. Moving on. Temperature is a measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in a system. You haven't said anything because we don't know what energy is, okay? Type of energy associated with motion. Yeah, we don't know what energy is. In fact, mathematical physics hasn't defined the word motion. So until you define energy and motion, we have no idea what you're talking about, especially if you're going to define energy. If you're going to define energy, means energy is not a physical object. So we can't talk about the motion of a concept. Okay, so you can't talk about the motion of energy. Okay, there's no such monster. Okay, but he says the photoelectric effect is when electrically charged particles are released from or within a material, an ejection of electrons when light falls on it. Red light will not eject electrons. Violet light will eject many electrons. Well, before you can get that far, before you can make that statement, you got to draw the atom for us. We need to see what your atom looks like, okay? Because you're using the planetary model of the atom, which nobody believes in, everybody debunks it, but that's what you're saying when you're saying that it's a flow of electron particles, of electrons. You can't say that until you draw your atom. And so if that's your atom there, a little bead that rolls around the nucleus, you got to justify that atom. And the main thing you have to justify is what keeps that electron bead rolling around faithfully around the proton bowling ball or the nucleus or whatever you want to call it. Why does it spontaneously fly away? Why does it stay within certain energy levels, as they're called, or orbitals? Why doesn't it spontaneously just fly away? Why doesn't it gain independence of its own volition? Okay? So unless you can justify your atom, you can't make that statement. That's so far an irrational statement because it's an unjustified statement. Okay, another fellow also talks about the photoelectric effect, and he says, you are unfair and in contradiction with your own proposal of science. Oh, okay. Let's see. Einstein has given both description and explanation of the photoelectric effect. Oh, has he? By saying that quantum of light, photons, are this and they do so, etc., he gave an explanation. The question is, did you get it? Do you understand it? If so, then the rational science session is over. Nobody tells you to believe it or not. Okay, what's the issue? The issue is that they give an irrational explanation. An irrational explanation is no explanation at all. So the answer to this is no, Einstein did not give an explanation for the photoelectric effect, not because I don't believe in it, but because it's irrational, because he doesn't have an atom. We need an atom. And until you can draw the atom, you don't have an explanation, a mechanism of how the photoelectric effect, or what underlies the photoelectric effect. The photoelectric effect, supposedly, according to Einstein, according to all these bean brains from quantum mechanics, is that the photon hits the electron bead and knocks it out. And the flow of all these electron beads is what they call electricity. So they say, well, when you shine light on polished metal, well, you have all these beads flowing, that's called current. And so light induces electrons to flow, electricity, current. Well, before you can say all that, first you got to draw your photon. You got to find out what a photon is. Photon originates in an atom, according to quantum mechanics. And so you got to tell us how that photon is created. I mean, does it shoot infinite photons, an atom? That's the first issue. What does it look like? Is it a little ball? And then this photon hits the electron, which is rolling around an atom. And you got to justify your atom. Again, you got to draw the atom, and if you draw the planetary atom, which is the one that's the one that Einstein used, he says, the photon is hitting the electron bead and knocking it out of its orbit, and now it starts flowing as electricity. Okay, you got to draw your atom. And unless you can do that, you don't have a rational explanation. So it's not a question of belief, it's that he can't make sense of his explanation. That's the issue. Okay, so no, Einstein does not have an explanation for the photoelectric effect. What he has in it is an equation, a description, and nothing but. Okay, another fellow, again, all these issues come back to the word object, to the word thing. What is a thing? Okay, and fellow says, you're insisting on shape, that which has a single boundary. Absolutely not. Okay, no, shape is not that which has a single boundary. In fact, the fellow says, boundary is left undefined but can be put into everyday speech as where the shape ends. So we have like, circular argument. It's a single boundary. What's a boundary? It's where the shape ends. What is shape? Where the boundary ends. Or what is contained within a boundary or whatever. So these people are idiots. Okay, and what is an idiot? Okay, idiot is a guy with big ideas. See, normal people, rational people, they have ideas. But an idiot has big ideas, known as idiot. Big idea, idiot. And so we call them idiots. Okay, and yeah, so anyone who looks for the word shape, tries to define the word shape, is an idiot. Okay, he's got big ideas. The object is then treated as a synonym of shape. Again, not, because an object is a noun. It's a category, okay? It's a grammatical category. Whereas shape is an adjective, a qualifier of a noun. Okay, so shape is not a noun in physics. Okay, and until you get that through your skull, well, you remain an idiot. Okay, so yeah, please do not ask about shape. Okay, and here's an example of idiots. Okay, other people who ask stupid questions. Okay, and by the way, the issue with shape is context. And again, these people never learn that we have to define the word object, not the word shape. And the word object is a problem because if we don't define it as that which has shape, then it defaults to see and touch, which is an irrational definition of the word object. We can't use the words, the notion of object being see, touch in science, in physics, in great measure because you need two objects, one to do the seeing and the touching. The other one is that you're not talking about, you have to define the word object before you define motion of such as seeing and touching. And there's a lot of arguments against the see-touch definition. Therefore, we can't use that one. On the other hand, shape is a universal property of all objects. So shape is the scientific definition. You don't like the definition because it destroys your religion? Very simple. Get in the ring, bring your definition, and defend it. Don't tell me authority, don't tell me democracy, don't tell me tradition, none of that. Okay, you got to defend the rational definition that you propose, if it's rational. And, nobody does that. They just want to say, well, we've done this all forever. So who are you, Bill, to tell us that this is something else? I'm not telling you. I'm saying I'm defining the word object as that which has shape. That's what it is for physics. You don't like it, get in the ring and fight for your definition and attack mine. I have no problem with people attacking my definition. But you got to put something in exchange because we can't do physics, physical interpretations without an object. You need the word object in physics. You need to define it somehow. Okay, as fellow says, if temperature is rope, how does something like laser cooling work? Whoa, that blew my mind. I need a beer to understand the question. Also, why do states of material change with temperature? And another fellow says, is time a physical quantity? A physical quantity. Or just another spirit, as you call them. Where are the time robes? Now you see why these people are idiots, okay? Yeah, we have a little bit of problem with some of these folks. Okay, let's move on, see if we have a little better questions or comments. But no, you'll find out that we have a lot of irrational comments this time around. And a lot of them have to do with the word object or thing. Klaus says, a field is a mathematical representation. Okay, mathematical representation, great. It's concept. Okay, we see weather fields all the time. So he sees these concepts, these mathematical concepts, I guess in his dreams or when he shoots up, I don't know. Temperature is a measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in a system. Again, we don't know what energy is, okay? Physics use math all the time. Yeah, and that's why they have no understanding of physics, okay? He's really referring to mathematical physicists, okay? And so, yeah, physics does not use math at all. Physics is entirely qualitative. We have to explain how this universe works. We need to explain the mechanisms, such as, gravity and magnetism. Fellow says, every quantity has shape. Another fellow says, yeah, quantity has shape. What are these people onto? Bartender, I want to have whatever he had, Frequency is a shape. Idiots? Yes, absolutely. If you don't believe it, put your hand on the stove while it is on high. These people think that they choose whether heat, for example, right, is a physical object. And they say it is because, see, if you put the hand in the stove, the heat will burn your hand. And I had a similar type of argument from the electric universe. Again, a bunch of, what, idiots? And what did the idiots of the electric universe say? Well, they say that I said that electricity is not a physical object. Electricity is a concept known as current. Even under quantum mechanics, the flow of electron beads, fine, we'll accept it, no problem. That's a concept. The electron bead, you can say, is a physical object. You cannot say that the flow of electron beads, electricity, current, whatever you want to call it, is an object. And these people say, well, if you want to see if it's an object, stick your fingers into the outlet and find out, and you'll see what zaps you. That's an object. That's electricity. So, and these people, same thing. They have this irrational reasoning, if you can call it reasoning, where they say heat is an object. Oh, it's a physical, yeah, because you put your hand in the fire and it burns your hand. So the heat burned your hand. This is their logic, or illogic. Okay, this is their way of thinking. This is, or lack of. Okay, here's another fellow. Says theoretical and mathematical physics employs mathematical models, methods suitable for the formulation of theories and abstractions of physical objects. Abstractions of physical objects. What the hell is that? To explain natural phenomena. Well, how do you explain natural phenomena if you're not going to put an object? I mean, it's either an abstraction, a concept, meaning, right? Either it's a concept or an object. You can't have it both ways. Either it has shape or it doesn't have shape. Black or white. God cannot be both. Either God has shape and is a human being with hands and so on, or God is love. God is intelligence, concepts. And if that's what you pray to, a concept, to love, well, fine. I hope love answers you. I hope love has ears, right? A fellow says, Math Viz doesn't explain. This is the Donald Simonek, okay? And he says, Math Viz doesn't explain, Math Viz describes. So no, when this fellow says that to explain natural phenomena, no. Mathematical physics does not explain anything. It has only irrational explanations, with quotations, meaning no explanation at all. This is like saying in the old days with traditional religions, they would say that the spirit or the soul does this and that. That's not an explanation. Okay, that's not an explanation. Explanation is a mechanism that you have to explain why the curtain moved, what moved the curtain. And you cannot say a spirit moved the curtain, because a spirit is not a physical object. The soul moved the curtain. And this is no different when you say that mass did this and the energy did that and the field did this and time did that. You're not explaining anything. You're describing mathematically, but you turn that into a physical interpretation, which it ain't. So yeah, at least Donald Simonek apparently seems to insinuate that there's a difference between an explanation and a description, because he says, Math Viz does not explain. It describes. So yeah, this fellow's wrong. There is no explanation of natural phenomena in all of mathematical physics. Okay, so do not confuse an explanation with a description. Okay, another fellow says, lots of questions this time around. Mathematical physics, also known as mathematics, right, uses experimental tools to probe natural physical phenomena with concern on experiments and observation. Yeah, that's what mathematical physics does. Mathematics is experiments and observation. And he says physics follows the scientific method. Absolutely, yeah, no doubt about it. And here's a scientific method for those of you who want to come in contact with it. There's the rational scientific method, what we call it, right? Hypothesis, these are the assumptions that you need to propose in order to give a physical interpretation to a phenomena. And you have to present the objects, point to them. You better have solid definitions, meaning words that can be used consistently. And you have to have the initial scene or the first few frames of the film that essentially are the statements of the facts according to you, the ones you're going to use to prop up your theory. What's the theory? The mechanisms and the causes. Okay, so that is the scientific method. So yeah, physics does follow the scientific method. So he's right about that. Now here's an example of why we don't do mathematical physics, meaning mathematics, meaning that we don't do these things in physics. Okay, what is it? According to mathematical physics, they go out there and they do experiments and then they do observations. And here's one good example, the gravity probe B experiment that was done in 2004. Little price tag of 750 million. That came out of your pocket if you're a taxpayer, right? And what they did with this experiment, they proved frame dragging. So let's see what frame dragging is. Well, Wikipedia explains what the gravity probe B experiment was all about. It says the gyroscopes were intended to, what? Reveal how space and time are warped by the presence of the Earth. So the Earth warps time, and that's what these gyroscopes were intended to prove, okay? And by how much the Earth rotation drags what? Space-time around with it. So the Earth is going to drag time. This is what the gravity probe B experiment was all about. And you say, Bill, you're taking things out of context. You're taking things too literally, or they have all these answers to this, right? And so we go to another place. It says, in general relativity, a mass's rotation influences the motion of objects in its neighborhood. Put simply, the rotating mass drags along space-time in the vicinity. So am I putting words in their mouth? And am I taking things out of context when they're telling you this in your face? And you say, well, who knows? Who knows who wrote this stuff? Maybe some guy that doesn't know squat, right? Okay, so let's go with NASA. Here's NASA, okay? This comes out of their site. Hopefully that's an official site that you believe in. And it's got to do with this Lagos 2 experiment in 1992 that also started with this frame dragging nonsense. The costs unknown. I wasn't able to find out what the costs were, but think of it something similar to the gravity probe B. Okay, so direct evidence that the Earth drags space and time around itself as it rotates. Now, am I putting words in their mouth or what? This comes out of that link that you see at the bottom there, by the way. Okay, the research is the most accurate direct measurement to date of the lens-theory effect. What is that? A bizarre effect of general relativity, which predicts, they do predictions in science, right? In this so-called mathematical physics, which predicts a rotating mass will drag space around it. The lens-theory effect is known as frame dragging. As the Earth rotates, it pulls space, time in its vicinity around itself. Now, am I putting words in their mouth, or what is this? I'm telling you that these people are saying, right? These people are telling you, let me get this out of here. These people are telling you that there's this thingy they call frame dragging. And what is it, this phenomena? What it does is it pulls, especially time, around itself. It warps time, it pulls it, it drags it. They figured this out through experiments, through measurement. You paid millions of dollars for it. So don't tell me that, that observation and experiment and measurement lead to rational conclusions. These people are all have come up with irrational explanations for how the universe works. They're saying the Earth is dragging time, bending time, warping time around itself. You figure it out. I mean, if you think that's rational, well, drop the ball on that one and say, forget it. I throw the towel in, I give up. No, it's not at all rational. Okay, the physical interpretations are idiocy. Okay, here Paul says pseudoscience, description of entanglement. Yeah, absolutely. Entanglement is pseudoscience. Okay, especially the description. Entanglement is instantaneous reaction regardless of distance without being physically connected to another object. Absolutely irrational. Yeah, you're right. So that is pseudoscience. And quantum communication is the manipulation of photons resulting in an instantaneous change in the corresponding photons. Yeah, all that is irrational. What the quantum guys are saying is that if you have two objects separated by gazillions of miles in space, one object influences the other one instantaneously without there being any mediation, without any contact, physical contact whatsoever. And yeah, that's called pseudoscience. Okay, yeah. So in that, he got it right. That's called pseudoscience. Okay, fellow asks, he says, your thoughts on the lecture, and he shows me this fellow known as David Harriman. His talk is The Philosophic Corruption of Reality slash Physics. And he gives a clear language how we ended up with modern physics and where we went wrong and somewhat why. So he wants me to comment on this. Okay, well, what I can say is that, when I went to see Harriman's talk, he says that modern physics is irrational. He says that it affects technology. That's why it's important whether it's rational or not. And it reinforces the universe is unintelligible. In other words, the notion that he says that if we allow the irrational physical interpretations of mathematical physics, we're going to end up with the notion that no one can understand how the universe actually works. Don't even try. We're not going to figure it out. And all we can do, that's all that mathematical physics suggests, is that science is not, is a process where you seek but never find. Okay, so the deal is to seek, to measure, to describe, but you're never going to be able to explain the mechanisms because it's beyond our comprehension, beyond human comprehension, partly because Father Universe thinks differently than humans. He thinks in maybe four-dimensional thought, and we poor slobs here are stuck in 3 dimensions, so what can we possibly understand about the universe? So that's essentially what he's saying. But what's the problem I have with him, with this Harriman? It's not what he criticizes, which is correct. It's what he proposes in exchange, and that's where science vibrates. Remember, science is not about criticizing. Science is about proposing. Okay? We all can criticize, that's great, but then you got to offer something in exchange. We have to explain how this universe works. And if what you propose in exchange is more irrational than what you're trying to get out of the way, then you got a bigger problem. You're just creating a bigger monster. And his Harriman goes back to math. And that's where the problem is. And he goes back to, again, these notions, these misunderstandings of what a concept and an object is, the object-concept dichotomy. He doesn't understand the difference between an object and a concept. And that's where he dies. But his criticism is great, yeah. That's the only thing positive. But see, a lot of people criticize the establishment. It doesn't mean that they can propose something in exchange. Scientist is a guy who proposes, not a guy who criticizes. Okay, it's the difference between the boxer who's in the ring and the reporter who is, taking notes as a visitor, as a part of the audience. That guy's not in the ring fighting. So he can write whatever he wants. He says, oh, look at this. He should have raised his left fist and should have ducked or whatever. Yeah, that's easy for you to say because you're down there. Why don't you get in the ring and fight and find out how well you do? Show us how you do it. That's the scientist. Scientist is the guy in the ring, not the reporter in the audience. Okay, so let's keep those in the right context. Okay, another fellow says, thread that makes ropes, atoms, all matter has many problems. Okay, number one is that it is a belief. Okay, there's nothing of scientific method, especially experiment and observe, to give it credence. Okay, not at theory level where we have repeatable experimentation with consistent observations. Okay, so this guy seems to harp on experiments, belief, observe. Okay, credence, whether you believe or not, whether you accept it or not in your way of thinking, right? How do these intangible physical mechanisms not get tangled? Okay, so here's the answer, okay? First of all, it's not a belief, it's known as an assumption. And, he'll learn that when he gets to high school. He'll learn if he takes a course in physics, okay? Theists, atheists, and agnostics, they're idiots, all three of them. Why? Because an idiot is a guy with big ideas, as I said before. And when you talk about credence, you're talking about religion, about belief, about opinion. Okay, so credence plays no part whatsoever in science. And again, we're not talking about belief, we're talking about an assumption. You make an assumption, you say, let us assume, right, that gravity, light is mediated by a rope, by a thread, by whatever, and then you try to explain your theory based on that assumption. That's how the scientific method works. Okay, a theory has nothing to do with experiment and observation. If you put experiment and observation together, you don't end up with a theory. Okay, and here let me prove it to you. Okay, let's prove with a little experiment here. Okay, here's an experiment. I do it all the time. Very dangerous, very expensive. Okay, we let go of the pencil and it falls to the desk. Falls downward. To make it repeatable, to be scientific, we do it twice at least. Okay, so you see that every time I let go of it, it falls downwards. No strings attached. Okay, it's just nothing here, nothing there. Let go of it, falls downwards. Okay, okay. So we have experiment and we have observation. Did we do science? Was that science? You want to do it at home to verify the experiment, do your own observation, go ahead. Just let go of the pencil and then tell me if you did science, if that's scientific, what you did. So no, science is not observation and experiment, measurement, prediction. None of that has anything to do with science. Science is explaining the mechanism. Why? What caused the pencil to fall to the floor? Okay, so this guy harps on intangibility, and intangible means untouchable, untangleable. Okay, so to say, so if he says, okay, these are intangible ropes, okay, or threads, then he says, how come they can't touch? How come they don't get tangled? Well, you can't get tangled if it's intangible by definition. So all I can recommend is the problem is that you lack basic understanding of the English language. You should take English as a second language 101 as a prerequisite to Science 101. So yeah, before you go into Science 101, or Physics 101, whichever one you're going to take in high school, you should first take English as a second language, because you don't know, right now you don't understand the difference between, if something is intangible, it means it's untouchable. Untouchable means it can't get tangled or anything like that, because it can't touch something else. It can't even make contact because it's untouchable, intangible, right? And this guy says, if it's intangible, why can't it touch something? How come it doesn't get tangled? Because it's intangible. That's the answer. You just need to learn the word intangible, okay? Look it up, or when you get to high school, maybe they'll teach you what intangibility means. Okay, fellow says, the magic rope is the electromagnetic rope that ties every atom together, but never tangles. Another tango. All these guys love to tango, or gets caught on anything. The phantom thread is the object that doesn't exist, that Bill Gates uses as a backdrop to present physics on. Aha. They are apparently irrational, but my problem with them is that they aren't very useful. Okay? First he attacks it, says they're magical. He says they're rational. Okay, I don't know. If they're magical, I think there's a difference between rational and magical, right? There is no good reason not to substitute these geometric models. Geometric model, what the hell is that? With geometric arithmetic models, we can do math with, if they are analogous. Okay, let's answer this poor fellow. And magic only when compared to macro objects. Again, these people are harping on touch. Okay, so they say in the macro world, in our everyday world, we touch things. And so how come I can't touch this thing that Mother Nature has out there with which she mediates, gravity, magnetism, electricity, the workings of the atom, etc. We have all this stuff. It's intangible. And here, let me show you once again. Let's see if, I don't know, I'll try to prove it to you, okay? Here's evidence. I hope you believe, okay? Here, I'm going to let go of the pencil. Here's nothing here. I can't touch. I can't see anything there other than the ear. I can't see the ear, but I can touch the ear. But I can't see or touch whatever is pulling this thing downwards, okay? It always falls to the ground. I don't know why. Never falls to the ceiling. And so it is intangible. It is invisible. And this person says, why can't I touch it? Well, because it's intangible and invisible. That's why you can't touch or see. What are you going to answer these guys? They don't understand the word intangible. They don't understand the word invisible. Yeah, Mother Nature's mediators are invisible and intangible. Hopefully, whatever you use to uh, explain your theory with had better be intangible and invisible. Because if it is tangible and visible, you have not explained Mother Nature's universe or Father Universe's world, you know. You have not explained that world out there because that world is mediated by intangible, invisible objects. If you come in there and you say, oh, how come I can't touch it? Well, hopefully we can't touch it. Because if you go to the lab and you can touch whatever mediates gravity or whatever mediates light, whatever mediates magnetism, then it's not Mother Nature's universe. Because her world is mediated by intangible, invisible objects. Okay? And if you don't put an object there, you're introducing spirits. You're introducing black magic into your explanation. Okay, I hope that sinks in. Maybe I'm lucky. Okay, and I don't know, science useful? What is this useful stuff? See, he said, let me push this over here. He said something about useful. He said, it's not very useful. Well, useful has to do with technology. We don't care about useful in science. Science is all explanation. We need to explain the mechanisms of how this universe works. We don't care if it's useful, especially for you, or to build a car or a house. Usefulness has nothing to do with science. It only has to do with technology. And then Rope is not our geometric model, whatever that is. I have no idea what this person is talking about. And no, it doesn't equal an arithmetic or mathematical model because math is description and physics is explanation. So please do not confuse physics with math. Okay, so I don't, again, know what these people are thinking about. I think they are mathematical idiots. Okay, what is an idiot? A person with big, very big ideas. Okay, he doesn't have little ideas, he has idiots. It's known as idiots. Okay. Fellow says also all this stuff about objects, it just kills their religion, so they're fighting with everything they've got. Okay, an object is 3D in a 3D spatial environment which we can see and touch with human senses or detect, measure using technology. So again, very simple. Is the table on the other side of the universe that you can't see or touch or ever hope to an object? Is the table that the Klingon has in his planet where we can't see or touch from here, so far away, gazillions of light years, right, away. We can't see or touch it. So is that a table an object? Does the word table belong to the group or set known as objects? Is a table an object? Anywhere. The table in the Klingons' world, the table on the other side of this planet, the table that I have in my house, which you can't see or touch right now. You know, you can't see or touch it. Is the word table an object? Does it belong to the set of objects? And that's the only issue. Shape, on the other hand, can have shape. You don't have to see or touch it. Okay? If a table has shape, you can draw it, you can visualize it, you can make an image, you can imagine it. The word imagine comes from image, right? If you can make a picture of it in your mind or on a piece of paper, it's an object. Very simple. If you can't, it's a concept. It's either concept or object. Black or white, yes or no, on or off. That's straightforward. Shape literally has nothing to do with defining objects. Well, that's just an unsubstantiated statement. You haven't justified that. You just made a statement, a baseless statement, okay? No justification for your opinion, belief. And again, the definition of the word object destroys all religions. All these people fight, they scratch, you're killing me, Bill. Yeah, I know, I'm so sorry that your religion has to die. Okay, so here it is. He continues, he says, the problem defining object, that which has shape, is that there are many shapes that aren't objects. 2D, 4D, 5D, shadows, holes. And again, these poor people, you know, they struggle with all this. And so the first thing is name a single 2D shape that isn't an object. In other words, that doesn't have shape. He's saying that has shape, okay. So if it has shape, it's an object by definition. And you're saying there's a 2D shape that isn't an object. you're just violating the definition. That's all you're doing. So you're contradicting yourself. Okay, you either go with the definition of shape or you come up with something else. You got to tell me, if a 2D shape is not an object, why isn't it an object according to the definition? And the only way you can do that is coming up with another definition, okay, that you can defend. And hopefully it's not see or touch, because you can see or touch any shape, or you can at least see it. Whether you can touch it, that's a separate issue. There are no 4D or 5D shapes, but I would love for you to draw one, okay? Any 4D or 5D shape, I want to see it, okay? So please prove that there are 4D and 5D shapes, other than in Lululand, okay? Or after 10 beers. Anyways, shadows and holes are not standalone, independent. Therefore, they do not have shape. Shape is all around, and no shadow is all around, okay? Because the shadow continues all the way to the light source. Okay, so light is simply a what do you call it? A spirit, essentially. What is light? Light is just a bunch of ropes connected to something, and you see the vibrations, essentially, of those ropes, the torsions, and that's what this shadow is. And a hole, well, once we remove everything that's around it, well, we have no hole. So you're confusing the glass, the empty glass, with the filled part of the glass. We're saying that, Bugs Bunny's hole is not an object. And you say, well, it has shape. No, what has shape is the ground. That's what has shape, okay? If we remove the ground, there is no hole, okay? So hole is not an object, sorry, okay? Yeah, it takes a long time for these people to understand holes and objects and shadows are not objects. Hologram is not an object, okay? Hologram is a shadow, 3D shadow, just a bunch of lights. That's all they are, game of lights. That's what a shadow is. Okay, and hole, again, you can't put a hole in space. You take the hole in space, just a hole. Don't bring the ground. Bugs Bunny has this hole in the ground. Don't bring the ground, just bring the hole. Okay, and let's put it in space, or bring your shadow in space, just a shadow. Okay, and see if it stands alone. Okay, is there such a thing as a standalone shadow? Is there such a thing as a standalone hole? Or do you need something? Is it a dependent object, meaning actually a concept, right? A dependent concept. But is it a standalone object? Okay, and we don't have to specify that in the definition, because you have a bunch of idiots that say, oh, but you should put that in the definition then. No, we do not have to. We say that it has to have shape. Okay, and that already means it's standalone. Okay, you don't need to have a dependent object in order for it to have shape. You cannot say, like, for example, the halo of an angel. If you just put the halo, whether it's a plate or a ring, that's an object. But if you call it halo, now it has to have the angel. Now it's a dependent object, because the halo is a holy ring or a holy plate. Okay, so in order for it to be holy, you need that angel or that holy man underneath it. Okay, without that, all you have is a ring or a plate. You don't call it a halo. Okay, halo becomes halo only with something in there. So the word halo is not an object. Halo is a concept because it's not a dependent and independent object. The independent object is known as a ring or a plate. And again, it takes a long time for these people to learn all these arguments. Okay, and that's why they fight, because they want to see if they can destroy the word object as that which has shape, and they can't. And so they bring issues of tradition, democracy, authority. They say, well, this is what they taught me. Oh, I'm so sorry. You went to the wrong, you should ask for your money back. You went to the wrong school, monastery. Okay, fellow says, many objects have no defining shape and require containment to have one. Yeah, irrelevant, because we're not talking about what is the shape of air, what is the shape of water. We're saying, does it have shape? Does energy have shape? Does mass have shape? Does force, does time have shape? It's not a question of what is the shape of energy, what is the shape of time. So it's not a what is, it's a does it. Okay, that's what you got to figure out. And it's a yes or no type of question. And so the question is, if you have, you don't need to put a container. Okay, you can take air in a balloon, pop the balloon in space. An astronaut does that for us. And you color coded the blob, or you can use water for that matter. If you want to use water, use water. That way you can show very clearly that this water suddenly comes out and it's an irregular blob. And the guy said, well, what is the shape of that blob? Well, it's a blobby shape. It's a blobby shape, okay? It has shape. It's a yes or no question. That thing has shape. Now, what is the shape of that blob? Well, it's blobby. I don't. What are you going to tell these people? Okay. My God. My devil. My poor devil. He's rolling around in his grave down there. Okay, final issue. Conceptual thoughts or ideas. Yeah, you didn't define. All you said is thought and idea. You look up thought, it's an idea. What is idea? Any conception, a thought. So all you did is give me a synonym. Okay, and we define it as a word that invokes or embodies two objects. Now you don't have a synonym, you have a definition. If you don't like it, come up with an alternative. Give us a definition of the word concept that does not include synonyms. And with that, I'll see you